So Glenn Kushner said that what the criminals do not protect victims. Donald Trump is both criminally and civilly responsible for crimes and indictments and all this stuff. So he never wants to think about victims. And that's why he's not going to protect the 1,000+ victims. Because when it comes to the victims of Epstein and Donald Trump, you have to think of two core things. Number one, Donald Trump ran the Miss Teen USA pageant, the Miss USA pageant, and the big one, he also had Trump models. In other words, Trump had, while friends of Epstein, while Epstein was out there finding these 1,000 victims, Donald Trump was his closest personal friend, and his friend ran a model agency that participated in H-1B1 visa fraud. In addition to that was doing the Miss Teen USA pageant, which is run in all 50 states. What we should be doing is trying to find how many victims of Epstein were connected to Trump models and to Miss Teen USA and Miss USA. Why? Because those would be crimes that Trump committed by endangering these people, by exposing children to sexual traffickers. This is like a big area that is like sitting out there for us to be able to do in all 50 states and that people can find. It's how many of these victims were connected to methods that Epstein used to find girls. Because what some of these victims have come out, like during the Epstein trial, the Maxwell trial, is that one of the girls who was connected to the Miss Teen USA pageant, but she didn't want to say. Of course she didn't want to say. And probably didn't want to talk about Trump because Trump was freaking president. So you don't want to say, oh yeah, by the way, I was trafficked and the president of the United States handed me off to Epstein. We need to find out how Epstein got a hold of 1,000 girls. And how do you get a hold of 1,000 people? You don't get a hold of 1,000 people by hanging out in front of a high school. You get the 1,000 people because you have to interview and all that stuff. And that's what you get when you have a modeling agency. That's what you're going to have when you have things like when you have access to the Miss Teen USA, when you have access to the Miss USA pageant. These are the areas that we should be highly concentrating our attention, because Trump does not want to pay attention to the victims, because he doesn't want us looking at the victims. Because if any of the victims were, for example, Miss Teen USA pageant girls, events that involve children are legally and can be held even criminally liable if they expose children to dangerous situations. It is the responsibility of event planners, it is the responsibility of event organizers to protect children if they are dealing with children. For example, Miss Teen USA. If they're, the modeling agencies may or may not, but if he was directly funneling models or Miss USA girls to Epstein, then that is a problem. Then that covers more than a friendship, wouldn't it? That would involve a business relationship. A relationship in which Trump would be able to, as he went back and inspected the girls in the Miss Teen USA pageant, that he was possibly even inspecting teenage girls, that if they were Epstein girls, they would become his girls, because Trump would go to the parties where that hot, sexy girl that he thought, when she was changing in the back room, that could be his, because Epstein would grab her and then maybe, give Donald Trump, a 20% discount for bringing her. I don't know. That sort of thing. And including Donald Trump being involved in the one-stop parties. We don't know how many girls who were at the one-stop parties that Trump put on at his properties, that people like Uncle Luke of Two Life Crew, and Uncle Luke referred that Eddie Murphy was there and Mike Tyson was there. So we know the people who were there. The only question is this: did Trump utilize things like the Miss Teen USA pageant, the or the Miss USA pageant, or Trump models to traffic girls to his buddy Epstein. And then those girls would be able to explain potentially rather or just how involved was the friendship, particularly when it came that Trump was routinely involved in organizations that were involving in potentially exploitable girls, connected to his friend Epstein, and then after Epstein with Tony Lazzaro, the Minnesota Epstein. These are the questions that we should be asking, but we're not asking because they're very uncomfortable, but we can easily find these solutions because there are employment records. There are records of pageant girls in all 50 states, and the question is, how many of those girls showed up as Epstein girls or Tony Lazzaro girls? These are the questions that we should be asking, and understanding that Trump will never release them because Trump is a criminal, convicted criminal, indicted criminal, civilly held liable criminal who does not want to give power to victims of crime, because to empower victims of crime is for him to be able to say, okay, I did bad things and I need to do things, because victims of crime are not things that criminals want to think about. Criminals do not want to think about the impact of the drugs they sell. They just want to sell the drugs, and if they go to jail, fine, it's because I sold drugs. It's not because of the lives I destroyed and the families I destroyed. It's, I'm a bad person because I'm a criminal, but I don't want to think about what I did. And Trump's that way. Trump's that way also because probably Trump developed sexual addictions. Sexual addictions that Epstein played on because Trump was a paying customer, according to Katie Johnson and others. So if that's the case, then Epstein would be playing constantly on Trump's evident sexual addiction, and sex addicts do not believe that the people that they are sexually dealing with, deviant towards, that those are human beings. Because a sex addict who does violent things through their sexual addiction do not see the woman as a woman. It is just an object. It is an object that is connected to their addiction. And Trump was a sex addict that Epstein fed, and that Trump had the capacity, by being the friend of Epstein, to be able to pull from all of these girl sources of Miss Teen USA, of Miss USA, of Trump models, to bring girls to feed his need, and to Epstein, who would be like a secondary filter. And you could even see inside of the statements about the one-stop parties that Trump was an animal. What you can see is that that is also the case when Trump went on national radio and national television, sexualizing his daughter, bragging about his sex, which these are like bigger discussions that we can have on this, as to what we as human beings allow men to be able to say and do, because men can be sexual freaks, women can't. Or how we can actually talk about how women are raped as sex workers. And that's, for example, the difference between Katie Johnson's statement regarding the rape that happened to her that Trump was involved in versus, say, the statements of, versus the other women that Trump assaulted, that came out and said that Trump assaulted them, and like how Trump approaches, girls and women. And probably what we should have done from the beginning is paid more attention to the underage addictions of Trump, his pedophilia, which was evident going back to the 90s in his approach to his own daughter and his approach to be able to inspect Miss Teen USA girls and Miss USA pageants. So we should be focusing our attention, in my opinion, on whether or not how many of the victims show up in the feedstock that Trump would be able to provide to Epstein or Tony Lazzaro. So let's take a look at this and let's look more in depth. Thank you.